Good morning. This is the Drug War in the South. I'm Michelle Wright. I'm the policy manager of the Drug Policy Alliance Office of National Affairs, and I live in Washington, D.C., but I do a priority of my work here in Atlanta and also in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. For those of you coming in, plenty of spaces, plenty of seats. Thanks for waking up this morning. I know it's not that early, but still pretty early. We have a great panel for you today. We have a great conversation, hopefully, and we have some really big news out of Atlanta this morning. I kind of want to just tease that out a little bit, let people get in and get settled. And this is a conversation about the South. Like, it's not necessarily about the global South, but if there's questions about that, I think there's some similarities when it comes to it. But just looking over the session summary, we know that the drug war has been particularly harsh in the South, and some of the most draconian pieces of legislation have happened, and there's been a lot of collateral consequences that communities have faced, specifically Black and Brown communities. And how do those align with what's happening nationally? Where and what are the possibilities for reform? So today I'm joined by, I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves, and there's some really great panelists here. So, Kenny?
All right, so I'm Pastor Kenneth Glasgow, the founder of the Ordinary People Society in the Prodigal Child Project, also co-founder of formerly incarcerated convicted people and families movement, as well as an anchor organization with the SMA, which is the Southern Movement Assembly. Consists of about 40 different organizations that concentrate mostly and mainly on the South, along with a couple of other people that's on that anchor organization. And we do a number of things, a lot of service work. We feed, named after my mother, Mama Tina's Mission House. We have, I don't call them halfway houses because we don't do nothing halfway. We call them transition houses. We have transition houses for men and transition houses for women. We're more prominent in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. We do spread throughout Tennessee and Mississippi. And one of the things we have been able to accomplish, we changed several laws in Alabama. Some say 13, some say 17. I'm not quite sure the number. 3 laws in Georgia, I know, 1 in Florida, 1 in West Virginia. And those laws were all pertaining to voting rights and drug policy. We do a lot of stuff pertaining to harm reduction. So our service work is connected to harm reduction, that's connected to the policy work, that's connected to the advocacy that gets the legislator and all the changes. So we look at everything as being interlinked and intersync, so therefore we can get things done. And that's the only way that I know to get things done in the South. The difference in the South and the North, which one of the main things that I've been saying for years, and it still holds true, is that resources in the South, we never was getting money. And I'm quite sure anybody on this panel will tell you, we don't get money down in the South. Till, Chloe come up, Michelle, wherever Michelle went, she was in here. She's hiding somewhere. Anyway, until they came and they started changing the atmosphere. DPA started it, and then Michelle and them took it over and started changing the funding apparatus on getting money to the South. So our resources always was our relationships. And you'll learn that as we go through.
Thank you for that, Kenny. My name is Sharon Ravert. I am the founding director of Peachtree NORML, National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws in Georgia. I stepped down in April, and we have a fantastic new gentleman that's taking the helm of Peachtree NORML. I sit on the steering committee of Moms United to End the War on Drugs, and I am also working with a new entity that we just rolled out about 4 days ago called We Do Better. And right now we're doing, there's 5 main things that we're working on. One of them is drug policy. We're trying to defund the drug war, and if you want to find out more about that, you can go to wedobetter.org and learn about it. At the moment, most of our recruits and the people in We Do Better are in Houston, Texas. They're in Puerto Rico as well. We're helping on that end of, helping communities that have been harmed by hurricanes. So I'm a harm reductionist. I am now starting to do political consulting. 5 years ago, I went into the state capitol and was pretty much laughed at when I brought up the word marijuana. I told them we weren't going away. The day that most of you may have arrived, on the 10th, Atlanta decriminalized cannabis, and it's now a $75 non-arrestable offense. It was a long, hard battle. Many people in this room were a big part of that in helping us. We did phone banking for a week and reached out to not the council members, but their constituents, and insisted that they do something to help us, and they called their city council people, and we got a unanimous vote, which we were not expecting. So your voices are important, and if you have a chance to use them, please do so. Like Kenny said, we do have a funding issue in the South. I about had a heart attack when I saw California was going to get something like $10 or $20 million to pass cannabis. I thought, my goodness, what we could do in the South, we could probably have the whole Southeast done with less money than that. Oh, it's 1 million. Is it 1 million?
I said with 1 million.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I just counted 10 of the southeastern states and thought they would go. With $10 million, $1 million apiece, quite frankly, because we have done that work in the South to make those coalitions and to build those relationships, not only with legislators and the people that hold stake in this and with the people that are being affected by the drug war, but with people in other organizations. And so we have the Army. We are ready. We just need a little bit of funding, and we'll be on our way right to where everyone else is. So I appreciate everybody getting up so early in the morning. I see everybody's got a little bit of coffee, maybe a little tea, and if somebody wants to grab me a cup, I'm just kidding. I already had my limit. Thank you.
I want coffee. I'm Julia Negron. I feel a little bit like an imposter on this panel because I've only been a Southern babe now for about 4 years. I came from California, and now I live in a little beach town on the Gulf Coast of Florida called Venice. There's a Venice in California and a Venice in Florida. I'm, like Sharon, on the steering committee of Moms United in the War on Drugs, and did a lot of advocacy work in California, which was like an easy road compared to what we're going through in Florida. And moving down there, I started with, I'm a co-founder, and some of my other co-founders are here, of a harm reduction project called Suncoast Harm Reduction Project. And talk about funding. The only person that's backed us in our work has been Drug Policy Alliance, and for that we're incredibly grateful. Florida, going to the South, it's like I'm in a position to compare and contrast how things work in other states and how things work in Florida. And, I'm one of those people that when they send out the registration forms for these conferences, I get to check every box. I'm a former injection drug. I know I'm cleverly disguised as somebody's grandma, but I'm a former injection drug user and formerly incarcerated. My kid is a heroin addict who's been in California State Prison about 3 times now. And, I've been in recovery since 1985, and I'm a former drug counselor. It's like I check almost every box. The only thing I missed was sex work, and I'm kind of getting resentful. But anyway, so here I am in the South, right? And I'm trying to translate some of the things we learned in advocacy work in California, and it's so difficult because we're so disjointed. Like in Florida, it's like trying to build a coalition to get something happening is so crazy hard. It's like you're in a time warp in the 80s or something. And one of the things that's really been like, chapping my hide lately is, coming from another state, is that felons can't vote in Florida. So basically, it isn't like the voters pick the legislature picks what voters they want to have, and so consequently what laws they want to have go through, and a large percentage of the population is not involved. Now, we've been only operating for 3 or 4 years. Then we started out by just being outlaw naloxone distributors. We just popped the back of our SUVs and started handing it out. And, gratefully getting naloxone from the naloxone ferry all the time. And now we've been able to work in Tallahassee to change laws so that we have naloxone access and come up with workarounds. So we're just straight up distributing it now in big bunches. But as a harm reduction group, we've been able to bring our kind of momness, to the table and say that we want decriminalization, that we don't want nonviolent drug offenders arrested. And we want resources for Hep C and HIV, and we want this human rights issue to be talked about more and not so stuck in the 80s and behind the curve. And so it's difficult work, It's just like I said, it's like being in a time warp and trying to deal with people that are so stuck in some old paradigm of racism and classism and things that I never thought I'd have to face in my life, that, you get discouraged. And then I get to come to the conference and get my batteries recharged, like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this shit, So thank you for letting me be on this panel, and I hope we can have a really robust conversation about that, because we want to go for syringe exchange next year in Florida, and I want to start working with people in the South to really build a coalition, so we aren't faced with such old ideas and such, man, I feel like I'm in some Southern Gothic novel, You are. I am. Like, I'm in freaking Gone with the Wind, and it's like, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again, It's like, I'm trying to learn it, and I did learn, Southern things like bless his heart, Anyway, so I'm learning, so I'm real grateful to be here.
Welcome to our world. Hi, everybody. My name is Nishambi Lambright, and I am the interim ED at One Voice. My boss left in August to become the interim president and CEO of the National NAACP back in July. So, since that time, I've been a little crazy, but, No, this is Derek Johnson. Reverend Barber is, or was on the national board of NAACP, may still be. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, he has, that's right, he has his own organization, and yeah, he's a great partner, and he comes to Mississippi all the time. We love him.
He knows about cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
We've had a couple times.
Yes, indeed. So One Voice was born out of the Mississippi NAACP, and we still work very closely together. We're still in the same office in Jackson, Mississippi. We are a leadership development and policy organization, and part of our leadership development strategy is to teach folks the tools and skills of community organizing. So, policy work, leadership development, none of that can be done without a firm grassroots community organizing skill set along with the racial justice lens. So that's just a little bit about our principles and how we enter the work. I've been involved in this criminal justice reform work and drug reform work, I guess, for the last 10, 15 years. We started out on of course, a racial justice lens. We do community trainings about racial profiling, and notice that, hey, police are coming into our communities in very different ways. Like, where are they getting all of this money from? To set up all of these roadblocks, to do these drug stings, confidential informants. And so we didn't know what that was. All we knew is that we were looking at these cases of racial profiling, police brutality, just unjust and unfair practices. And I met a guy named Rob Rooks. At that time, Rob was working for, I think he was at ACLU then. And so he was like, well, you guys are really, all of your problems are stemming from war on drugs stuff and burn grant funding That's where these local police departments are getting the funding to do all of this crazy stuff in these poor rural communities. They new fancy tanks, cars, police chiefs riding around in tanks and mobile command units. It's like, where's all this stuff coming from? So that was our first introduction to the war on drugs and how it impacts communities of color and how it impacts poor and rural communities. So since that time, our strategy has been both statewide and local, mostly local because for the last several years, we've had supermajorities in both houses. It's been really, really hard to get rid of the tough on crime message without kind of selling ourselves out with the right on crime philosophy. That has been successful in the South in terms of transforming policy. We were able to get a few sentencing reform bills passed over the last couple of years, but they have come at heavy cost. We've also been able to change our criminal record expungement laws to make it easier for folks to get a second chance after they get out of jail. But at the same time that these laws pass, those unintended consequences have gone up because people have to pay more fees now. So we've been trying our best to get some of these laws and local policies passed at the local level first, and hoping that that will be a groundswell up to the state level. And of course, we're engaged in census work now and election reform work leading up to the 2020 census, because we're hoping to redraw our lines around the state so we can get more representation, because we feel like that's going to be key to changing the political structure both at the local and statewide level.
You can go ahead and keep the mic over there, Nishambi. I'm going to stay with you and just maybe painting a picture for those of us that weren't born and raised in the Deep South or in the South at all. In what ways have you seen an expansion of over-militarization? You talked a little bit about that, but also mass incarceration and the decimation of communities as the war on drugs has developed. And Sharon and Kenny, I'd like to get your voice in there too.
Yeah, definitely the expansions of prisons has been one. We've had a number of very popular cases in the South of folks being locked up, given life sentences for drug crimes, and being a part of that prison industrial complex. We had the case of Corey May, was one of our first big drug cases, war on drug cases in Mississippi that was covered by Reason Magazine. Way back in the day. Corey was babysitting his 18-month-old daughter, and the police just kind of raided his house. They had the wrong house. It ended up saying they had the wrong apartment, and he killed a police officer. He was just protecting his daughter, and he got a life sentence, but his sentence was overturned, and he is at home with his family now, but he spent a good 8 years in prison before that case was overturned. And we also had the case of Vincent Hudson, who was caught up in the 3 strikes law because he was riding around with someone who was also a convicted felon, and they pulled him over and they found a trace of cocaine in the carpet of his car. And that ended up being a life sentence because on the 3 strikes law. And so he spent about 9 years in prison, and he was able to get out. He was able to get his sentence overturned, but died 2 months later because of horrific prison conditions. He went in a very healthy man, and while he was there, contracted pneumonia, and ended up being on his deathbed over that time, and only maybe enjoyed a month of his life before he passed away after getting out. So it's case of when I think about the impact, I think about the impact on families like that. That has been the most disastrous impact for us. And the over-militarization of the police departments has led to the lack of services. So in our schools, we have school resource officers in every school. Some of our school districts have police departments, but we don't have social workers in schools. So when I think about that, I just think about the misuse of funding. That's the thing that comes to mind the most when I think about our over-militarization. And I can go on and on this. I'll pass the mic.
Yeah. Did you want Kenny?
Both Sharon and Kenny.
Wow, I've already forgot what the question was. I'm sorry. 5 hours of sleep didn't do very good for me last night. Stop that. That's not what that is.
Just thinking about the expansion.
He's whispering something that is, I'm not going to repeat
Yeah,
it. How about that?
No, keep it moving.
I
Let's keep
thought
it
he was going to
moving.
get in the microphone. So in the South, yeah, I mean, I focus specifically on Georgia, obviously. So we began building private prisons and signing those contracts that says you got to keep them 90% full, and you get a discount if you have them 100% full. And so we've been ramping up that for quite a while, since the 80s. I can't even name how many prisons we have and how many, it's just, they just have popped up so quickly. We have a Republican governor that came in and made it his platform to do criminal justice reform. And they have pulled people out of jail and out of prison and have taken down minor nonviolent offenses, petty stuff, quality of life stuff, and we've done a good job in that area, but they are scared to touch the drug war. They don't want to talk about marijuana or other drugs. And so, quite frankly, our message has always been, if you're not going to talk about the drug war, then you're not serious about criminal justice reform. We've got to get the beast. You know, and the beast is eating our families, and it's happening, like she said, mainly in communities of color and in the rural communities where people don't feel like they have a voice. So that's the main thing. In Georgia, I'll give you one statistic that will show you where we are, and this has happened even after 8 years of criminal justice reform. 1 in every 13 citizens of my state are under some kind of state supervision. 1 out of 13. They're either in jail, they're in prison, they're on probation or parole. And we have an extremely high recidivism rate. So where we're trying to work around is, I heard Kenny say this yesterday, and it's an important thing to mention, and I'm going to steal it from him. We've got to get these folks trained and educated while they're sitting there doing nothing. If we can't get them out of jail and they're going anyway, we need to be training them while they're there, not once they get out. And we have to have wraparound services. So that's where we're working at, and refocusing resources, like she said, away from the criminal justice system and into places where people can feel safe and come and get the help they need. And also, it's real important, and we try to do this in Georgia, to get those people that need those services at the table to tell us what they need. I've been to jail once for 2 days. I don't know what I need. I just came out and went back home and started cooking, right? I don't know what they need, but I want them at the table with me telling our legislators what they need, because I don't know. I can ask, but I don't know. And it may be different for everybody. But the South is an ugly, you know, it's bad. The drug war's bad. It's ripped apart families, it's ripped apart communities, and quite frankly, I don't trust the cops. Nobody trusts them here, and that's the problem. And so getting them to the table as well and sitting down and talking to them, and that's what we've been doing most recently, is getting the stakeholders that are saying, if you don't like the law, change the law, which is, again, what we did in Atlanta. And then we have some people in the police department saying they're going to circumvent that and use the state law. Well, excuse me, you can't use that anymore. We don't make the laws, and you need to change them, but when you finally get it done, we're going to circumvent you and still throw you in jail. So anyway, we're trying to have more conversations with those stakeholders and get the people that need to be at the table. Coalition building's huge in Georgia and across the South, and we've done a pretty good job at it, but there's a long way to go.
So I asked her how deep she want to go. I don't want to be long, but I do want to know how deep you want to go seriously.
I mean, I want to go deep.
So if we're looking into
Deep.
the over militarization and all that, with the police going to be the police, law enforcement going to be law enforcement, but let's really talk about why they're able to get away with it in the South. Okay? So let's look at us. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do, but what we going to do? So the first thing that I would look at is the separation of us, how we separate ourselves and get into our own silos. So the church started doing what? Demonizing everybody who used drugs. And we allowed that to happen as the church because the church started following society instead of the church leading society in the more realistic way that it should be. Then we as black folks start separating ourselves. Let's just be honest. In the South, you know, we always look at everything race. Let's take away race for a minute. Let's look at classism because that's one of the key things about the South. Okay? Because you got black folks that don't want to deal with other black folks that don't know a damn thing about black folks because they don't talk to poor black folks because they think they're better than the poor black folks and they still black folks. And so that separates us. So those that are working part of the system and their livelihood is in the system. You know, back when I was in prison doing those 14 years, in 1999, I'll never forget, there was an article, you should remember it, Pastor. It was an article in Florida when we was down there locked up, when you was in feds, I was in Polk CI doing state. You know, I worked for the state, he worked for the feds, y'all. But anyway, while we was incarcerated, they had an article in 1999 stating in 2005, Michelle and William, who all would be correctional officers and who all would be inmates for Florida. They had already estimated that they would split the whole state in half on who would be, and they chose all these black folks that they was good. Is anybody hearing me? So they separated us by classism, all of us fell into it. The other part that happened is that, you know, we let society dictate it, and then those of us up there in the north, we come to groups like this, and one thing that we have to realize is that up there in the north, we going by the Linsky model and all that, and organizing and how it should be, and then in the south, guess what? We up under the King model and how it still is. So the misogyny is still there. Because the church just allowing women to come. You understand? Y'all see where I'm coming from? The separation and all that, the segregation still there. We're not going to deal with the LGBTQ and all that, still separation is still there. So we got to break down all those barriers first before we can even attempt to act like we want to address these people on their militariness. And how come their laws are so stiff and they get away with that? And the only reason they get away with it is because we allowed ourselves to separate ourselves from ourselves. So that ain't Darcy.
It ain't Dorsey.
So once we get that done, then we could turn around and ask these people, how come a young man named Christopher Thomas in Alabama could get shot to death by a police officer who already got thrown out and fired from Pensacola, Florida, but he could go transfer to Alabama or either to Georgia, and then he shoots and kills somebody else, and he don't even get a jury trial.
Right.
He don't lose the case. The family don't lose the case. Is that they got a Judge Albritton in the 11th Circuit that we are up under here in Atlanta that says, no, we're not even going to let it go before trial. And we, because of our separation, we allow that to happen. So what we have now is an opportunity. Let me talk to white folks for a minute. So we have an opportunity now with Trump coming in, who draw the line in the sand. Guess what? That either you white and you fighting against racism, or either you racist. So in 1965 and all this, I'm gonna go real deep for a minute. Hear me out. In 1965, Dr. King set up all this, and he got all this done and everything, and there was 600 of them that went across. All that 50,500 something folks, that's a damn lie. One but 600 folks crossed that Selma Bridge. But it did not become national until progressive white folks from up north came down there, and then they got killed. Viola Lawuzu, the preacher and all that, the Catholic priest, and then they was like, oh, hell no, white folks ain't going for it. So why don't white folks step up and say, okay, hell no, we ain't going for it again? Like they just did in Charlottesville. Like they just did over there yesterday when we was over there in the CNN building. Right. They was challenging me and Darcy when they seen all them lawyers, all them white folks come, they was like, uh-oh, we got trouble. We got problems. Atlanta PD said, no, we gone. The security guards were left by themselves. So that's what needs to happen again. So we need to look at the inclusivity in a whole different apparatus than what we've been doing. Because what happened is we spend so much time trying to figure out whose position it is and who's going to do what in this movement that my mama say the movement ain't never stopped. We just all stop damn moving. So if we get to that point now to where we break down all these barriers, or we just don't let these barriers exist. We just don't allow these barriers to exist. You know, me and Pastor James over there in Florida, Pastor James, wave your hand. That, Joe, you need to get with. We're going to preachers now and say, how many white folks in church? Well, you know, white folks meet over there, we meet over there. Okay, well, when we going to their church? How many LGBTQ in your church? How many felons in your church? And breaking that down because we are under the King model. Okay, do you say female in your church? Because if you go to California, New York, or somewhere and say that, you done just violated and sound misogynistic. So we're breaking that down. But guess what? We need y'all help to break that down so then we can stop some of this militarianism and all this over-policing.
So, Julie, I want to get your voice into this conversation. You know, Pastor Glasgow brings up about some of these difficult relationships and collaborations that have to happen. Can you talk a little bit about what you're up against in Florida and what some of those difficult relationships and non-traditional relationships have been?
And it should be easy because, you know, I'm old enough to remember 1965 too. And, you know, the work we did when we stepped in and helped with civil rights. That we needed to break down those barriers and all be one. In Florida, I see almost everything as civil rights violations. It's like, for me, it's like the old days because it's, I see Lynn Paltrow, this is a real important one. They love taking your kids away in Florida. You know, I've been through that in California, but it's way different in Florida. They're gonna take them, period. The end, no fight, you know? They love discriminatory practices of almost any kind. You know, you can go to I went to the Walmart the other day to get a insulin syringe for my cat that's diabetic, and they wouldn't sell it to me. Now, I don't know if I look that weird really, but I thought, you know, the law is that they can sell you a syringe if they don't think you're a drug user or something. I'm like, I'm there go like, my cat, here's his insulin, you know. It's just crazy, that part. The other thing is, though, they have laws like the Marchman Act, where, you know, literally like 3 or 4 people can get together and slam someone into, quote, coerced treatment. I mean, everywhere you turn, it's like there's no civil rights. You can't. But the vote thing is the thing that's driving me really crazy right now because I've been to Tallahassee. I've talked to those guys. We lobbied last year to try, with different legislators where we work to try to stop mandatory minimums from coming back. And now in Florida, they've come back. We have new mandatory minimum laws that literally say it's a capital offense. And Megan, maybe you can help me out. To me, that means there's a death penalty in there somewhere, maybe? You know, I don't know how far this is gonna go, but we were trying to roll all that stuff back. You know, we already made that mistake. Are we gonna do it again? So, I mean, but like I said, we're like, bunch of white moms, you know, trumping around going, you know, no, this can't happen. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But the truth is we can't get anywhere with these legislators that are like a Republican boys club, and they're going to keep it that way. And there's no way for anybody to vote. My son lives with me. He's a 6-time felon from California. He can't get a job. He can't vote. He can't get health insurance. There's nothing that you can get if you have that kind of background, and he's in recovery and he's on medication that he has to pay cash for. It's just like everything, it's like they don't give a shit. They just don't give a shit. And I know that's not very professional. But
It's okay. You're in the good company.
But I'll tell you, I've been through all that. With two of my grandchildren were taken. I was raised in foster homes. I'm a state-raised kid from the state of California. And I mean, this should not be happening all over again. We went through this once. Am I right, Kenny? We did all this work. So why are we now moving backwards and allowing states like Florida? You know what, when I think about Trump, the biggest thing that came to mind when he got into office was, I used to think I moved to Florida and I could change Florida and make it more like some of the other states that have been more progressive. And then this administration got in and I thought their whole goal is to make every state like Florida. So I mean, everything I was doing, I was like, oh my God. How do we make this work? And what the Reverend is saying is absolutely true. We need to stop being so divided. We need to, I don't know, but I don't feel like there's a coalition in the South, and there needs to be one. We need that model back.
Yeah. And so, Nishambi, just thinking about communication and the work that you do at One Voice, and Julia, you bring up a great point about, 45 and his rhetoric and his gang of, criminals that's in the executive office. Nishambi, can you talk a little bit about the communication strategy that needs to happen, do you think, in order to, reach Southerners on a different way, a different level?
Yeah, absolutely. I attended the communications and messaging workshop yesterday. I think it was in this same room yesterday afternoon, and they talked about not being so scientific and academic in our stuff as activists. We tend to be, we want to go in there with all of our facts and stuff and just really resonating on folks' values. And we've known that in the South for years anyway, that we can't go, most of our community meetings are in churches. So, the first time you go in there, sounding like a academic or like you're from up north, then you've already lost. They're not even listening to you. So communications is key to it. And it is about really taking the values that people push in our faces, telling us that we're, unreligious, that we don't believe in families, and taking that and pushing it back in their faces. And I just give one example. When we were fighting the personhood amendment, the anti-choice amendment in Mississippi, that was back in 2013. It's been a while ago now. Everyone thought that, Mississippi was going to be the first abortion-free state. We only have one abortion facility left in the entire state, and they just knew that, hey, this is going to be it. But we pushed it back in their face, and our coalition was called Mississippians for Healthy Families. So it's really about taking their rhetoric and pushing it back. Instead of saying Mississippians for abortion, we would have lost all day long. So yeah, we called it Mississippians for Healthy Families, because that is a healthy family, a family where everyone has the right to choose what happens to their own bodies and have all the health care options laid out for them. So it's really about focusing on those values and making them our values. We are the ones who are for families. We are the ones who are for healthy families. We are the ones that are for safety and justice. Let's stop letting them take our language and using it against us. And we spend so much time arguing against them and fighting them, and we almost start to buy in to their rhetoric. And we know that the first time, they go on the floor and start pushing all of these policies about locking folks up, that's not about families at all. But just like Pastor Kenny said, we let them shame us into saying, well, we are here, with folks that have records. But so what? So what? Everyone deserves a fair chance in our communities. Everyone has a family. All of our families are important and should be valued, and we just have to let folks stop shaming us, and we have to definitely focus on our communication strategy and hone in on that message of being the true representation of family values and moral statements.
Thanks. I think that's a great point on language and kind of taking back control. And Sharon, I want to switch to you just to talk a little bit about language and the campaign to reclassify marijuana here in Atlanta, but also, just sharing some of the good news that you got this morning, maybe telling people, exactly what happened and give me a little context.
Okay, yes. I love what you said. We have to flip the script. That was hard to say. Anyway, the message is about families. And the message that we've been utilizing a lot, because it seems to work regardless of the issue, is what about the children? What about the children? That's no longer the drug warriors' mantra. That's our mantra. They're taking our children.
That's right.
They're taking families and breaking them apart by putting their parents in jail.
That's right.
1 in 52 kids have a parent incarcerated. If you want to look even deeper, 1 in 8 African American children have a parent incarcerated. What about the children? Let's talk about that. So in Georgia, that's our message. What about the children? What about your Republican-led legislators that have always been about family matters? You did this to us. You made the laws, and you have a police and sheriff's department that are willing to do whatever you tell them to do. And so that's the flip of the message. Quite frank, yeah, that's even going way deep. But listen, I heard something when I first got involved with this 12 years ago, and I repeat it over and over again. And every week, I get more and more adamant about it. I am sick of defending my position. You defend yours.
That's right.
So I'm going to pull this up and move into the Atlanta good news, because I got this at 7:30 this morning, and I was working real close with Kwanzaa Hall's office and other legislators as we were working to do this over the last year. And so
Maybe
I got...
sorry to interrupt, but maybe a quick explanation for those that came in late about the ordinance
Okay.
passing.
So the ordinance passed right as everyone was arriving for the DPA conference, October 10th at 6:34 p.m. Mayor Kasim Reed signed the unanimously voted in ordinance to decriminalize, or what they like to call, again, language, reclassification of cannabis in the city only of Atlanta. Last year we had a couple of things on the state level introduced, but they went through, quite frankly, quicker than the medical laws did. We got through most committees. They died in rules. I doubt that'll happen again this year. So we do the city to city thing. So Atlanta did it. We've got a small town, Clarkston, that did it. One of the smallest towns in our state was the first city to do it, and now we've got the largest city, so that all the in-betweens are next. If we can do it in the smallest and the biggest, we can do the rest. So this morning, as we got the good news for the last few days that that reclassification has happened in the city, they reached out to me immediately and said, what's the next step? And I said, getting all of our people that are sitting in ACDC, which is the Atlanta City Detention Center, out of jail right now. And so, so this morning, I got and I'm not going to be able to pull it up right now because everybody's on the internet, but I'm going to do it by thought. So today, Kwanzaa Hall wants the new Atlanta marijuana law applied across the state. So that's the first step in it, and we're working towards that, obviously. The other two steps are to release anyone held in the ACDC for marijuana. And we are working with the state solicitor and the city court judges, asking them for anyone that is already out, that has to go to trial, that may take a year or two, to have their charges dropped and have their $75 ticket sent to them in the mail, so they can pay that. And also, we're working as well with this whole thing that came out today on expunging the marijuana records that hold people back.
That's huge.
Are you the first southern city?
I don't believe we are.
I was just wondering if she the first southern city
I
to
mean,
do the marijuana decal.
I feel, yeah, well, I was gonna, when we get in the question and answer, I think there's a comment coming from New Orleans that we can touch on. But that is great news, and I think, especially in this climate where every day something bad is happening, just to hear that there's people with vision and foresight saying, like, actually, we're not gonna forget the people that are in jail. We're not gonna forget the people that have been held back by this charge on their records. And that's really exciting. So, Pastor Kenny, just because I know you're going to give us a truth here, just thinking about these drug laws that are happening and just thinking about race and class, as you talked about before, is it possible to move drug laws in a way that the most vulnerable populations are helped without having that critical conversation on race?
I'm going to be honest with you. Race and the drug war go together like peanut butter and jelly. That's right. There's no way, and I tell people all the time, they want to talk about, well, let's talk about these policies, this and that and the other. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about race. They said, no, I don't want to talk, we want to talk about the policies. I said, well, I want to talk about the race. And they said, well, Glasgow, you want to change legislation, but you keep talking to us and make everything black and white. I said, well, the only thing I ever seen legislation is in black and white. You understand? So what we did in Alabama, I'm going to show you something real quick. We did this in Alabama and then extended out. The first prison strike that ever happened was in Georgia, 2012. And it ignited what happened up there in California. And those brothers up there gave homage to what happened in Georgia because they went across 10 prisons. They broke every barrier it was, what I was alluding to earlier that we need to do. They did it in prison. And they broke the religious barriers, the racial barriers, the classism barriers, and every kind of barrier. Because see, even though you think everybody in prison is an inmate and everybody done lost their name and got a number, they still try to set up those classism barriers by giving some of them trusteeship and some of them could do this and some of them could do that. And what happened was they said, well, Glasgow, we need you to change something out there. And I said, what is it? They said, change the party. And I had to sit up there and talk 6 o'clock in the morning to brothers in prison all over this country for about a whole year. We had the first national prison strike, for those of y'all that know about it. It went across 20 different states, 40 to 50 prisons, because those brothers made a new party. Yeah. And that party was called the We Party. Mm-hmm. And it addressed the legislation so much intact that they were scared that it was going to develop a union inside the prisons to stop labor. And that was going to stop all that contract leasing and their money and stuff. Right. And they turned around, and after that national prison strike, they started to develop all these kind of laws from this We Party. But to my point, we got them to where they could vote out of prison in Alabama. So now they vote out of prison in Alabama, and what they tried to do to be slick about it, y'all, was that they always have the prisons in these white rural areas. So they wanted them to vote where they at, and I said, no, they got to vote from where they're from. And so when we set that up, that We Party made such a significant effect because people who were sitting up there giving hot dogs and T-shirts to the black communities to get them to vote, knowing they was racist and stuff, now couldn't get the hot dogs and T-shirts to those that's in prison that's going to vote on them also. Right. So it became that effective. That's something we want to replicate all across the South. So get into what you're saying. There's no way we could talk about race, classism, and no way we could talk about the drug war without talking about racism and classism. Another example I want to give you is that we missed it. I don't see how we missed it, but we missed it. I talked to an older officer. Me and him got in a very, very healthy debate, Michelle. And what he told me was, he said, y'all didn't pay attention when we transformed and started this war. I said, well, you know, when it came in with Nixon and the drug war, this and that and the other, he said, yeah, but we didn't actually execute it to the late 80s and the early 90s. That's right. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you remember the police used to walk around with their uniforms on, and they had, they were so pressed and tight, even their sleeves were pressed. Right. You can look in their shoes, they floor shine shoes, and it looked like glass and almost see yourself. And they were respected like preachers walking through the community. He said that was the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and the early 80s. He said then in the 90s, y'all didn't even realize we started coming out in our bulletproof vests, our fatigues, and our boots, and we really went to war. And y'all didn't never realize the war was on you.
Right.
There's no way we could talk about this drug war without talking about race. And the most comfortable, should never be uncomfortable thing about this Drug Policy Alliance conference is that if you have any kind of offense or uncomfortability about talking about race, check yourself in this movement.
Exactly.
Because if you're part of this movement, then you should be like Sharon said, I shouldn't have to defend my place in this movement.
Right.
So you shouldn't feel uncomfortable about talking about race, because we're the ones that's trying to dispel race, eradicate race, and erase race. So how the hell could you be here and be racist?
Thank you for that. So I just want to open it up. I know that there's as many questions as I can think of. There's many perspectives out there, and I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask these experts questions that either relate to their own city or state, or ideas that they might want to talk a little bit more about. So if there's any questions at this point, yeah, I'm not going to let go of the mic because I've been taught by the great Asha Bandeli. So I'm just gonna okay.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Forbes, and my question is for you because I'm also an ordained minister since 2015. And I served 3 years in state prison in North Carolina for growing cannabis back in the 90s. I was busted in 1998, and I went through a full drug raid. So I have been hearing the stories about people of color, but I'm a white woman that went through that and lost my home, my child, everything, and got thrown in prison for 3 years. How do we, as white women, begin to break this barrier and have them understand that I was probably in the poor community that was affected by this drug war? And how do we break these barriers and stigma? Because in North Carolina, there's a lot of black people, because of what's going on politically, that don't like someone like me, or they look at someone like me not understanding. I've been there, and I'm a white woman. Yeah. What can we do to assist and facilitate having them understand that we all need to work together? When you come against that wall, they don't want to work with us because of our color. And during this whole thing with the monuments that went on in the South, because I made a statement, and I have a mixed child that I adopted and 2 mixed grandchildren, I was called a neo-Nazi. I was called a skinhead. I was raising my kids to be skinheads because I felt that even though these monuments represent a horrible time in history, we shouldn't desecrate them, put them somewhere so we never forget what happened. How do we, as a minister, how do we break these barriers between the black and white community?
I'm gonna be honest with you. You the first step is what you just did. That's the first step. And I'm really shocked to hear that they're not accepting you, because what I'm promoting all across the country is that right now is a time, it's serendipity that we got Trump. I sit up there and fight him verbally, publicly, but in my private prayer, thank God we got him, because it's bringing us together. He bringing us together, and he bringing white folks and black folks that thought racism was over to understand it still exists, and it's not over by a long shot. And so what my suggestion to you and my answer is, just stay with us. You got to do the same thing they tell us in recovery. Keep coming back.
That's right. Don't let them run you out. That's right.
Sharon said it, and you better hear it. And I'm going to be the one to tell you. You can tell anybody, Kenny Glasgow said it, and half of them that know me going to be like, we don't want to hear that Negro mouth. But anyway, and you tell them, you don't have to fight for your position. You are. Don't be ashamed that you white. What you should be ashamed of is that nobody accepted because you white. Because right now, one of the things that we need right now more than ever is for you and your white face and your white mouth to say, hey, this happened to me. This happened to me. Because you know how many of these laws got changed and the reason they racist and all that? Because white women say, oh, them Negroes too close to us, and they start gentrifying. Oh, them Negroes looked at me and they started making up the Emmett Till laws. All these Negroes. So if it took a white woman to cause racism, damn it, it might take a white woman to change.
Woo! Yes. Ms. Shambi, I know you wanted to say something as well.
I just want to, first of all, I appreciate your question, and I appreciate your work and everything that you've been through as well. Now, what I tell white folks is when they come to us with that question is to understand that when we talk about doing this work from a racial justice lens, it's not exclusive of white people. White folks have been victims of this whole racist setup. And so what you just talked about in terms of the raid on your house, you were a victim of what we've been discussing today. And so the thing that sets up the barrier in our community sometimes is when white allies come to us and say, well, I don't want to talk about the race stuff, this is what happened to me. But it's still a racial justice issue. You were just also a victim of it. And if we can get beyond saying, okay, racial justice lens is only for people of color, then we can create magic in our society. And so when you go back to these meetings, make sure that you say, hey, I am with you all the way with the racial justice framework, and I too have been a victim of racism in the drug war. And then that's when we start moving forward. But we can't go into that space saying, well, this is a racial justice and that's okay for you people, but I just want to join you, but I'm not a part of it. You are a part of it.
And be exact with it. Be real intentional about it. Let me say this. Be real intentional. Get with Sharon, get with Julie, get with Gretchen. You know what they do? We used to fight Sharon. Oh, you a white woman, just calm down. And Sharon started coming in, and it was doors we couldn't get in. Sharon to go in, and Sharon didn't talk about her whiteness. Sharon talked about statistics of all these black women that get locked up more than she would for marijuana, and they just let her go and lock them up. And she said, y'all need to stop locking up them black folks and start giving all the statistics on how they do us and start putting the truth out. So then guess what we start saying? Sharon, our damn spokesman.
All right, we got another question back here. I see some hands, so I'm trying to set up a little queue of right here, right here, right here. So.
Hey, my name's Laura, and I'm in Virginia, and I'm actually not asking a question. I just kind of wanted to respond. I am a formerly incarcerated white person, and I just kind of wanted to respond how we can also notice the racism. Myself, when I was incarcerated, that's when I noticed it the most. As a white person, my public defender said I looked like a fish out of water. People made all sorts of comments. I was a trustee. I kept getting kicked out of my job, but I kept getting pulled back into the trustee dorm, and there's a reason for that. And I was in Los Angeles County Jail, and we had this tiny little corner where it was me and maybe 3 other white girls, and the rest of the jail were all people of color. But somehow in a dorm of 180 women, they put us all in the same corner, and they gave us all the same job. And I later learned that that job was for, one of the best inmates or whatnot, formerly incarcerated people. And so I think part of it too is though recognizing that we may be victims of the state, we also have privilege in those spaces.
Thanks for that comment. So I'm gonna head over here. Sorry, excuse me. I was not prepared to run this morning, or any morning, so.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Rick Raines. I'm with Peachtree Normal. This is to Kenny, and what Sharon said, I think, is emblematic. She does not trust the police. I have a newly minted son-in-law that was a street policeman and then a detective, and we've had these discussions. He's for legalization, taxation, and regulation. But, you know, I went further with him, and I said, how about a national registry for policemen? When you get that badge number, when you complete that schooling, you get a badge number. That goes on a federal list. How many people flew here to the conference on an airplane? Y'all all look in the cockpit to see who's flying that thing, don't you? Women make the best landings, by the way. I'm a pilot, so. But every one of those people has a pilot's license that's good all across the country. And they police each other very carefully. And since they started something called cockpit resource management, where everybody has a say in what's going on in the airplane. They share that responsibility. And since then, we have the lowest accident rate that we've ever had. And if policemen knew that their livelihood and their ability to work across this nation, if I had something to say to Jeff Sessions, well, the first thing would be, I won't say it, I'll just spell it out. It starts with screw and ends with you. But I would say, with overreaching powers comes that overreaching responsibility. So what do y'all think about a national registry for police officers?
I'm be honest, I think it's great for a national registry for police officers, but you know, let's start doing it on our own. I'm a real proactive type dude. You know, y'all could go ahead and have your meetings, do all your stuff, put all your thing on there, and I'm gonna be trying to figure out how I could get me by 2 or 3 people. I don't need 100. By 2 or 3, and we're gonna start registering everybody. What I'm thinking when you said that is how I'm gonna register every cop I got and put it on, because I got a radio station, and put it on the news site and all that, and start registering in my damn self. They wanna make a list and put me on it, I got a list for y'all ass too.
Right. But even now, would that list work? I mean, we've seen countless times officers not charged for crimes, videos of people.
Exactly.
Can you talk on the mic?
So I wanted to say something about that, the proactive thing, like Kenny was just saying. In my town, which is 70 miles north of Atlanta, I was born and bred here, but I live up in the North Georgia mountains. We had a police officer hired by our sheriff's department that had been arresting people for marijuana and driving under the influence. And they were coming back, actually 12 of them out of the 60 that he arrested in the first 15 months he was there for marijuana DUI, at least 12 of them have filed lawsuits against them for civil rights. None of them had marijuana in their system. Okay? So they got rid of him. There was too much going on. Well, my sheriff hired him. And guess what happened? The community where he came from contacted us. He didn't spend a single day working in our town. We found out about it. We called the media. The media drove from Atlanta to Dahlonega. We did interviews. We got him out. He never stepped foot on the property.
That's how you do it.
You have a question?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. This has been a really great panel. My name is Maggie, and I'm part of a funding collaborative we fund in New Orleans. My question is, Kenny said there's no money in the South, which is true on so many levels. But what I don't understand is, what is your relationship? Because there is a lot of money in the South with individual donors. What is your relationship with individual donors? Are they coming to the table to help you?
That's a good question.
Very few are coming. I'm not gonna cry, and I'm gonna be very honest. Sometimes our work and our experience and our background cause us not to be palatable, acceptable, and some people use it to not be approachable, no matter how much work you've done. And I think those are some of the barriers that some of the funders, when I mentioned earlier, Michelle, William was back there, and a couple of others are trying to change now. DPA been doing it the long haul, and thank God for those young funders back there now that I just named that's trying to change it. But until that change, it won't happen. And I'm not being pessimistic, I'm really being optimistic because they are changing it now. The other side of that is the organizations, in some of the most national organizations, these funders that you're talking about will go to them instead of going to people like us that's really doing the work. And let's just call it what it is. And so they look at, we need our money to go and do this work, and we see all this work happening in the South, so we're going to go to the ACLUs, we're going to go to the NAACP, we're going to go to the house shops, we're going to go to them, and don't know that they don't know a damn thing about the South and what we're doing. And so that's what's happening. So if you have that opportunity, get with those two young people that's over there, that's funders, William and Michelle, that's trying to change it, and help them change that, because that's something they're doing in the funding world. And we thank God for y'all. I'm going to give y'all homage for that. And we can thank y'all right now for doing that change, because they are fighting an uphill battle, and they winning. But it's going to take people like you to get with them to help them win it even more.
Yeah, Julia, go ahead.
Say, we really need to help each other and fund the little grassroots things that are going on, because, you know, I work with a couple of recovery advocacy organizations. I've never seen so much money. It's like corporate world, you know, they have like tons of money to reinvent the wheel yet one more time. It's almost hard to stay in and do the work there. But for little grassroots groups like what Kenny's done, what we've all done, people don't think we need funding. You know, they write us up and go, oh, those are like a bunch of white moms from the suburbs, like we were all rich, and you know, it's like all these little grassroots groups do need funding. And there are a couple of people, like I think in Florida, that have been real philanthropic and really helpful in the work. But in general, you see the state doesn't fund, like I said before, they don't fund shit. They don't care about certain people. You know, it's amazing to me that it's like there's no help, there's no benefits, there's no resources. And so we just have to keep I hope we're going to step out really more and fund the little people and not these big glossy national orgs, you know, that seem to have so much money. You know, we can't get the money together to do a web page. We keep trying, you know. It's hard. You got to really do the work and help each other.
These white progressive groups.
So,
And don't get fooled now because some of them black. They still white progressive groups.
right.
Yeah, and I'll just say real quickly, in Mississippi, most of the old wealth are plantation owners, so that's a no. And because of tort reform that was passed in the late 90s, our trial lawyers, that money dried up, and so it's really hard to raise money from individual donors in Mississippi.
Gotcha. So, question over here.
Well, my name is Gary Wainwright. I'm a lawyer from New Orleans, Louisiana. And, you know, we like to talk about the South, but of course, Louisiana is a very special case. We're the most locked up political entity in the world. And I'm a little late, I apologize. I was actually working on a brief to the Louisiana Supreme Court on a second appeal over a young black man who's given 20 years in prison day for 3.5 grams of marijuana. You know, when we talk about what's going on with Trump, and of course we had the whole monuments thing kind of roiling across the South. I actually had to go to the cardiologist when that was going on in New Orleans, all right? Today in the paper, we had a big package of sentencing reforms go through in Louisiana. That's good. And they kick in November 1st. Today we have one of our sheriffs actually called a press conference to complain because they're forcing us to release all the good ones. Yes. These are the people that we can send out, we can rent them out, and we can make money off of them. Right. And the legislature's passed this law that's going into effect at the end of this month, and I'm going to lose all my good prisoners. This is the racism that's at the core of what's gone on and driven this drug war from the beginning. And so for all our brothers and sisters from the South, you know, we got the Voting Rights Act in 1964. They've been standing on our necks since then. And actually, I coined the phrase, the new Jim Crow.
Right.
Because I realized that this disenfranchisement behind this decades of pursuing black people and taking the right to vote away was the new poll tax. It was the new literacy tax. And so to everyone who's working for justice in the South, God bless you.
Thanks for that. I don't know about Michelle Alexander would say about that coined term, but we'll talk about that later.
Hey, my name is Maxwell. I work with the Georgia Care Project. I wanted to ask if you could go back to a point that you made earlier about the importance of, you know, white allies coming forward and standing at the front lines to take some of the brunt of the negative backlash that happens. And if you could kind of touch on, again, on, you know, how to do that while ensuring that we're not marginalizing the voices of those people we're trying to work with.
Two things stay. Two things.
Kenny,
stays-
I'm gonna let Nishambi go really quick.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
I just said I want to get in on that. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Two things stay very, very conscious of. One is directly impacted. Directly impacted. If we're the most directly impacted, then we should be leading and we should have our voices heard and all that. But along with that, as an ally, there's doors, there's funders, there's different places that we as directly impacted would not be received. And that's where you should be not knocking on the door, but kicking the goddamn door in. And so if you're asking me how you do that, just do it. Yes. We at a time right now, I don't want to see your strategic model and your plan. Just do it. We need you to show up like right now. We don't need to have no big discussion, no debate in the meetings about it. Just do it. Because right now, everything is fast tracking with this dude, Trump. He is causing so much havoc and chaos and all that we don't have time to be reactionary to what he's doing. We got to start doing it ahead of time. We done had 12, 15, 20 years and putting all these models together, putting all these plans together. It's time for us to just execute them. So if you're a white ally, be a white ally. And go, when you see racism, address it right then. As meaningful as when you see somebody in the store that'll sit up there and hand you your change in your hand and lay mine on the table, be that intentional. And that's the only way we're going to change it. Because until you that intentional as a white ally, everybody else going to feel like it's still all right.
And we need white people to talk to white people. Okay, we have enough organizers in our communities. And so when we get white allies to come to us and say, oh, we want to do this work, we want to come to your meetings, that's fine, but we need for white folks to talk to white folks. That's how we build a movement and bring folks in. We had a ballot initiative for public education a couple of years ago that didn't pass. Black folks voted on it 98%. White folks voted on it about 46%. We needed for white folks to go inside of white communities to say why it was important to support public schools. We had a bunch of white organizers that wanted to spend time in black neighborhoods. And it was like, no, we need you to go to your churches. We need you to go to your country clubs. We need you to go to your schools to talk to folks to get them to vote on this. They didn't want to do that. They said, no, in the white community, door-to-door doesn't work. Only mailers and commercials work in the white community, so door-to-door is not effective there. We'll spend our time canvassing in the black community. We didn't need white folks canvassing in the black community. We needed white folks in white communities. And so that, to me, is key to building our movement. We need white folks to talk to white folks who want to be allies.